Imagine waking up one day to find the world has lost its color. Not in a literal visual sense, but in a way that is far more unsettling. The vibrant hues of joy, connection, and meaning have faded into a universal, muted gray. The laughter of others sounds distant, like a radio playing in another room, its melody muffled by an invisible wall. The conversations you have feel like scripted dialogues where you are merely reciting lines, your voice hollow and disconnected from the words you speak. You are surrounded by people, at work, in cafes, on crowded streets. Yet you are adrift in an invisible ocean of solitude, an island of one in a sea of 7 billion. This isn't the peaceful solitude of a chosen retreat, the kind sought by monks and philosophers for contemplation. This is the aching, cavernous silence of loneliness. What is this phantom that walks beside us in broad daylight, that sits with us in crowded rooms, that whispers to us in the dead of night when the world is asleep? We often treat loneliness as a simple sadness, a temporary state of missing someone, a problem to be solved with a simple invitation or a phone call. But what if it is something more? What if loneliness is not an absence, but a presence? A language that the soul begins to speak when it has forgotten how to communicate with the world. A language of sighs, of empty spaces, of a quiet, persistent ache that no amount of noise can drown out. It is a cold that seeps into your bones, a fog that obscures the path ahead, a weight that settles upon your spirit without warning or explanation. We live in an age of unprecedented connectivity. Our digital networks span the globe, promising constant contact, instant validation, and a community of followers at our fingertips. Yet, study after study reveals a chilling paradox. We are, as a society, lonelier than at any other point in human history. How can this be? How can we be so surrounded, yet so profoundly alone? The answer lies in a tragic misunderstanding. We have mistaken connectivity for connection, followers for friends, and digital noise for genuine presence. We have built a world that is loud, but our souls have become silent. We have traded the depth of authentic relationship for the breadth of superficial interaction, and in doing so, we have engineered our own isolation. This exploration is not about the fleeting melancholy of being alone for an evening. It is about the chronic, soul-deep loneliness that becomes a part of one's identity. The kind of loneliness that makes you feel like a ghost in your own life, observing the world from behind an invisible pane of glass, forever separate, forever unseen. What if this feeling is not a personal failure, but a symptom of a much deeper, collective spiritual crisis? What if the language of loneliness is trying to tell us something vital about ourselves, about our society, and about the sacred connections we have lost not only with each other, but with our own innermost selves? We will journey into the heart of this silence, to understand its grammar, its syntax, and the profound, world-altering truth it is trying to speak. For within this ache lies not just pain, but a powerful, urgent invitation to come home. The architecture of this inner emptiness is not built overnight. It is constructed slowly, brick by invisible brick, from the accumulated weight of unmet needs, unspoken griefs, and the subtle erosions of genuine human connection. Philosophers and psychologists have long understood that loneliness is not merely the physical absence of others, but the spiritual and emotional absence of meaningful connection. It is the feeling that no one truly sees you, hears you, or understands the silent dialect of your soul. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychoanalyst, spoke of the shadow, those parts of ourselves that we repress and hide away from the world out of fear or shame. Chronic loneliness is often the sound the shadow makes when it is left to wander in the dark, unacknowledged and unintegrated. When we fail to connect with our own hidden depths, our fears, our insecurities, our unconventional desires, we lose the capacity to form deep connections with others. We present a carefully curated persona to the world, a mask of competence and contentment, while our true self remains isolated, starving for recognition. This internal division is the breeding ground for loneliness. The world may applaud the mask, but the soul knows it is unseen, and it weeps in silence. This predicament is amplified by the very structure of modern society. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, thrown into a world without inherent meaning, and burdened with the terrifying task of creating our own. This existential freedom, while empowering, can be terrifying, and in our fear, we often flee from the solitude required for self-creation. We seek distraction in noise, in superficial interactions, in the endless scroll of digital feeds. We do anything to avoid the profound silence where we might have to confront our own emptiness, our own mortality, our own lack of a preordained purpose. Aldous Huxley warned of this in his dystopian novel, Brave New World, where society medicates itself with pleasure and distraction to avoid any form of existential discomfort. Our modern world has perfected this art. We have an endless supply of entertainment, but a famine of meaning. We are experts at passing the time, but novices at living it. The problem is that genuine connection requires vulnerability, the very thing our curated, performative culture teaches us to avoid. We are taught to project strength, to hide our weaknesses, to build a personal brand, as if our very identity were a product to be marketed. But you cannot brand your soul. You cannot filter your deepest fears. True connection happens when two authentic selves meet, with all their imperfections and wounds exposed. When we are too afraid to show our true selves, we might be surrounded by people, but we remain profoundly lonely because the person they are interacting with isn't real. It is a carefully constructed avatar, a ghost in the machine of our own making, and an avatar cannot feel the warmth of a genuine embrace. This is the great paradox of modern loneliness. The fear of being rejected for who we are leads us to hide, and in hiding, we guarantee the very isolation we were trying to avoid. We build our own prisons, lock the doors from the inside, and then wonder why we feel so alone. We have become architects of our own solitude, and the blueprints were drawn by our deepest fears. The consequences of this hidden epidemic are not just emotional. They are etched into our biology, our society, and the very fabric of our reality. When loneliness becomes chronic, it is not just a feeling. It is a physiological state, a slow-motion emergency that puts the body on high alert. Neuroscientists have discovered that chronic loneliness triggers the same primal fight-or-flight responses in the brain as physical danger. Your body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, your immune system weakens, your sleep is disrupted, and your risk for a host of chronic illnesses, from heart disease and stroke to dementia, skyrockets. Loneliness, it turns out, is a quiet killer. It is a slow, creeping poison that dismantles you from the inside out, making you more susceptible to both physical and mental decay. It is a public health crisis hiding in plain sight, disguised as personal sadness. This unseen damage ripples outward, shaping our social world in ways we barely perceive. A society of lonely individuals is a society of fearful individuals. People who feel disconnected are more prone to tribalism, suspicion, and us versus them thinking. They seek belonging not in genuine community, but in rigid ideologies or online echo chambers, not because they are necessarily convinced by the ideas, but because the group offers a temporary antidote to their isolation. The political polarization, the social fragmentation, the breakdown of civil discourse, these are not just political problems. They are symptoms of a collective soul sickness. They are the macro-level consequences of millions of people feeling unseen, unheard, and profoundly alone. A lonely nation is an angry nation, a nation easily manipulated by those who promise a sense of belonging in exchange for loyalty to a cause, no matter how divisive. On a personal level, the consequences are just as devastating. Loneliness distorts your perception of reality. It acts like a filter that colors every interaction with a shade of gray. It makes you misinterpret social cues, seeing rejection where there is none, and hostility where there is only neutrality. You become hypervigilant for signs of abandonment, which ironically can lead you to push people away, thus creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to believe the story that loneliness tells you, that you are unworthy, that you are unlovable, that there is something fundamentally wrong with you. This is the ultimate lie of loneliness. It convinces you that your isolation is a reflection of your value, when in reality, it is a reflection of your unmet and entirely human need for connection. You become trapped in a vicious feedback loop where the pain of loneliness makes you withdraw, and your withdrawal deepens your loneliness. It is a perfect, self-sustaining prison, and you are both the inmate and the guard, holding the key in your hand but having forgotten what it is for. How, then, do you break free from a prison whose walls are invisible and whose bars are forged from your own fears? The rebellion against loneliness is not a grand, external battle fought with protests and proclamations. It is a quiet, internal revolution, a courageous turning inward against the tide of external distraction. It begins with a radical shift in perspective. You must stop treating loneliness as a problem to be solved and start treating it as a messenger to be understood. The ache of loneliness is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are human. It is the soul's homing signal, a sacred, persistent call to return to yourself and, from there, to genuine connection. The first act of this rebellion is to turn inward, not away. Instead of seeking more distraction, more noise, more superficial contact, you must find the courage to sit in the silence of your own company. This is the path of what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the hidden, disowned parts of yourself. You must be willing to meet the shadow of your loneliness, to listen to what it has to say without judgment. What fears does it hold? What past wounds is it protecting? What unmet needs is it crying out for? This is not a comfortable process. It requires you to face the very emptiness you have been running from your entire life. But as the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, one must have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. You must walk through the chaos of your inner world to find the light of your true self. This is the sacred work of self-reclamation. The second act of rebellion is to redefine connection. You must abandon the pursuit of validation from the crowd and seek the profound intimacy of authentic relationships. This means choosing quality over quantity. It is better to have one person who sees your soul than 1,000 followers who only see your mask. This requires immense courage. It requires you to be vulnerable, to take the terrifying risk of showing your true, imperfect self to another person, knowing that they might reject you. But as Brené Brown's research has so powerfully shown, vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of connection, joy, and belonging. You must learn to speak the language of your heart, even if your voice trembles. You must share your fears, your dreams, your wounds. This is how you build bridges across the chasm of loneliness. Not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of emotional honesty. It is in the shared silence between two souls who trust each other that the noise of the world finally fades, and the true music of connection can be heard. The ultimate truth that loneliness reveals, the final destination of this inward journey, is this: you were never truly alone. You were only disconnected from the vast, universal web of existence to which you have always belonged. The final, most powerful realization is that the cure for loneliness is not to be found in another person, but in the rediscovery of your own sacred worth and your unbreakable connection to life itself. When you heal your relationship with yourself, your relationship with the world transforms. The feeling of being an outsider, a ghost at the feast of life, dissolves when you realize that the entire universe resides within you. This is the great paradigm shift that turns the prison of loneliness into a gateway for transcendence. Loneliness is not a lack of people in your life. It is a lack of yourself in your life. When you learn to be a compassionate friend to your own soul, to listen to your own needs, to honor your own truth, the desperate hunger for external validation begins to fade. You no longer seek others to fill your emptiness, because you have discovered that you are already whole. You become a source of your own light, and in doing so, you become a beacon for others. People are drawn not to your neediness, but to your wholeness, not to your desperation, but to your peace. They sense in you a centeredness, a self-possession that is magnetic because it is rare. This is the final secret that the language of loneliness was trying to tell you all along. The ache you felt was not a punishment. It was an invitation to embark on the most important journey of your life, the journey back to your own soul. When you arrive, you will find that it was there waiting for you all along, patient and loving, unjudging and complete. And you will understand that true belonging is not something you find in the world. It is something you bring to the world. You are not a fragment seeking to be made whole. You are the universe remembering itself. Now go forth not in search of a connection, but as a living, breathing embodiment of it. The silence is no longer empty. It is full of the presence of your own magnificent being.